Oh, what fools these mortals be. I don't know how fitting that one was, but that's my favorite Shakespeare quote, ever. Hey, everybody! Overdue Doctor Who review time, and before I get into it, I've actually got a sponsor for this one. Now, before you start scrolling through to get past this part, it's free. Because it's a podcast. This video is being sponsored by the Radio vs. the Martians podcast, which, if you have not checked it out, is fun, insightful, often very funny. Mike Gillis and Casey Dorn, they talk about anything pop culture related. They talk about Steven Spielberg, Hayao Miyazaki, Star Trek, Twin Peaks. Heck, they had an extended discussion on whether or not people need to pull over for the Ghostbusters. Because, flashing lights, siren. Do they? But they talked about it. So, check them out, radioversusthemartians.com. Plus, it's a podcast, so whatever you use to listen to podcasts, they'll be on there. Plus, as a bonus, they've also got their running series where they do close examinations of every single film Arnold Schwarzenegger's ever made. The best and the worst. Podcast La Vista, baby. Also part of Radio vs. the Martians. Seriously, check them out. I'd been listening to them for years, well before they got in touch with me to talk about this. So I'm happy to have them as a sponsor. Moving along from there, the Shakespeare Code. So first outing for Martha with the Doctor. And it's sort of interesting in a few ways in how, especially in terms of how it contrasts with Rose, because Rose's first trip was to the far future, into space technically, just in orbit around Earth. But Martha's first trip, way back to the past, to, meet the most famous British writer of all time. And this episode, it's one I've never really thought too much of. I never thought it was bad, but I was just kind of, it's there. It's pretty good. I think, I don't know why, I don't think I gave credit for the performance of the guy who's actually playing Shakespeare. I don't think I gave him his due on previous watches. He didn't bowl me over, but he's good and he's charismatic, and when he goes for thoughtful moments, I buy it, which you kind of need for this. I know some people, because it's come up in the comments, actually surprisingly recently, I know some people dig the Carrionites and, the witches. I have mixed feelings about them. Part of it is because, it fits into the whole thing that tends to bug me about most Doctor Who historical set episodes, which is, oh, look at this well-known mythological supernatural phenomenon. Oh, it's aliens. Like, that trope within Doctor Who irritates me because, potentially it has the interesting angle of this is where our legends of these things come from, but it very, very rarely goes for that, and instead just presents us with just exactly what the thing appears to be, and it's obviously not the source of the myth because, all the people from that time are already thinking, oh my god, it's this thing that we already believe exists, and this alien just absolutely happens to line up with all the tropes and beliefs that we have about this mythological creature. It's lazy. I just don't really care for it. About the one time I think it kind of worked was the Beast, with the idea that the Beast may have been the origin for the very concept, or at least the visual elements of the devil. That, cool. That was vague enough and far-reaching back enough that worked. But something like, oh, well, there's these aliens that look like old crones, with you so far, and they do what looks like magic, but it's really technology. I'm like, okay, that's fairly standard for sci-fi. Anything that's highly technological enough will look like magic to those who don't know. Yeah, except the magic isn't controlled by math or actual physical, the pieces of technology. It's words. They speak words and amazing things happen. But we're going to emphasize that it's not magic. Plus one of them rides a broom. Yeah. I know some people can roll with this, some people find it fun, some people like get into the sort of the silliness of it, and that's fine. It doesn't work for me. It almost never works for me, and it doesn't really here. So the Carrionites, while I don't think the worst example of this kind of thing, because they have a few saving graces, I do think some of the stuff done with the dolls, and the puppet are actually visually pretty well realized in terms of looking creepy and unsettling. So I think that does help a little bit. It does take, you know, sort of the curse off it a little bit, but conceptually, I still don't love it. Like, I don't and I won't. So I have to move past that part of it. I do like sort of Martha, you know, trying to wrap her head around what's going on, and I like they get a pretty good balance with her sort of maintaining her modern sensibilities and sort of standing up for them, but not to the point of coming off like a jackass. Because when you've got, you know, a modern character in a historical time who kind of scoffs at the way things are there, you know, the idea that a woman doctor is unusual, or that she would need to be, you know, married to a man, or that it's fine for Shakespeare to flirt and have an affair even though he's got a wife back at home, and, you know, nobody blinks an eye, and it's possible when presented with things like that for characters just to come off like, why are you even traveling in time if you're just going to go, well, this is just silly. And she doesn't go that far, but it does still establish that she's a very strong-willed person and is prepared to stand by what she thinks is proper. And I think they balanced that pretty well, given that it could have gone off the rails fairly easily. I don't love the scene between Martha and the doctor in the bed at the inn. What I don't like about that is, like, as a concept in and of itself, it's fine, because it can start as a seed towards, you know, the developing feelings Martha has for him, while at the same time he's trying to undercut that at every step. But I don't love this. There's this one shot, just one lingering shot of her just kind of gazing at him. And I'm like, no, too soon. Can we build to that? Like, oh, God. One of the things I really like about Martha is, spoiler, the way she exits the show is by going, I'm never going to get out of this relationship what I want to, so I'm going to choose to leave. And for me, that strength gets at least slightly undercut if she's appears to be falling this hard, this fast for this guy. I wish they would have paced that better and spread it out over a couple more episodes instead of dropping something that freaking obvious, you know, first time out with him. That said, as much as I have repeatedly said how much I don't like the romantic angle of the doctor-companion relationship, I do appreciate that this actually works pretty well as a comparative to a rebound relationship. You know, the doctor shouldn't really be getting into this relationship. He knows that, which is why he keeps saying, you know, you're not replacing Rose, this isn't anything like that. Yet, even as he gets started in something that is very much intended to fill the void that the loss of Rose left. And I do think that is an interesting enough dynamic, and different from what other dynamics have happened, at least up to that point in Doctor Who, that it's well played. I don't, on principle, I kind of don't love it, but it is actually nuanced enough to not just feel like, here's the new love interest. It does, because like oftentimes on a TV show, even something where it doesn't have a dynamic like the Doctor companion that in my mind shouldn't be romantic in the first place, even when they are playing it straight, it's pretty rare for a show to understand properly this well, like what it's like to try and be with someone else after, you know, a really hard loss. Like, oftentimes on other shows, it'll be like one episode with one bad date, you know, after a hard breakup or whatever, and then after that, they introduce the new love interest, and everything's fine, and this feels like a more thoughtful sort of look at that element of relationships. Again, in a roundabout way, because the Doctor-companion relation dynamic is, strictly speaking, not really dating, although the show kind of treats it like it is. Yeah, hopefully people get what I'm saying with that. So, that whole element, it's honestly kind of bothering me less now than it would have back when I first watched it, because I think I was kind of like, why do we have to have this kind of crush thing going on again? And I still feel that, but like knowing that that's going to annoy me, I'm looking for, is there still validity to the way this relationship is being depicted? And I think there is. I think there's something there that is interesting and just different enough to not feel super repetitive yet. Well, down the road, we'll get to how frequently the Doctor and the companion becomes like a weird, forced, romantic-ish thing. But yeah, Shakespeare code for the... I mean, like, I'm also kind of a sucker for Shakespeare. I like Shakespeare in general. When I went to London, I went to the Globe Theatre. It was, I do sort of enjoy that stuff. So I'm a little bit of a sucker for it. While I don't love this episode by any means, I do consider it to be one of the better historical set episodes of Modern Who, as I tend to not like most of those, especially when they feature a famous historical figure. This is one of the better ones, I think. Oh, also, it's worth noting, the music in this for the Carrionite Swarm, during the climax is really, I mean, Murray Gold does good music anyway. That's honestly one of the highlight pieces for a villain that never returns. They get a really good, really intense music. It's a great track. Yeah, I think I'll just wrap it up on that one. The Shakespeare Code. It's a solid enough start. It's a decent enough follow-up to a strong introduction for Martha. It's not taking it to the next level, but it's also not nosediving it. So it's like, okay, cool. So that wraps up this one, folks. The Shakespeare Code. What do you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Buttons, links, Patreon, P.O. Box, Radio versus the Martians. Give them a listen. Seriously, it is actually a really great podcast. And because it's a podcast, it's free. So all that stuff, check it out. There'll be a link for Radio versus the Martians down in the description along with everything else. Give it a click, or you know what? It's okay if you don't. Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Because you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council's adjourned.